Over the short time that I've had my channel, I've had one question more than any others, and that's what kind of strings these are. And so I thought I'd take a minute and do a short video to answer that question and to talk about strings in general, especially because somebody specifically requested it in a comment. So these strings are Gerald Genssler's Corax strings. Gerald Genssler is sort of a boutique guy in Germany, and I'm not sure how many people work for him, but it's not many. And he does some neat things with strings. He's got lots of different kinds. This particular kind, Corax, are not made anymore. And they all sort of fall under the heading, his strings I mean, of what I believe he calls sonors, S-O-N-O-R-E-S. But it's a little bit unclear. He's not a big, online presence per se. I mean, he has a website and so on, but it's not flashy, always trying to sell you stuff. It's basically a lot of word of mouth. They're quite expensive, but he does some neat things, as I mentioned, like taking the specific measurements of your instrument and creating the strings just for your bass. Not just the regular string length from the nut to the bridge, but also how much string is in the peg box here, what is the amount of after length. That's how much string comes after the bridge and goes to the tailpiece. So I like them a lot, mostly because they work on this bass. That's sort of my primary thing. But another reason, or other reasons that I like them, is that they're like gut in many ways. They are synthetic, they're not real gut, but they do have the diameter similar to gut, which I like a lot. And they also have more stability than regular gut, so they stay in tune more, they last much longer. I've had these ones for a couple years. Regular gut can be like 6 months to a year. And also there's more clarity in the lower strings in particular. So this G really has a pitch, whereas on regular gut strings or wrapped gut strings, it's gonna be very thuddy, very hard to distinguish this actual pitch. So I really like that. They also last quite long, and they're also quite even across the strings. It all has the same sort of quality as you go from low to high. Additionally, these are a little easier to bow than regular gut strings. It's still not the best sound in the world, but I think it's a little easier to cheat than from regular gut strings. It's not bad, and you can get away with it if you're sort of in an ensemble. So I like them for all those reasons. They're softer than steel strings, so they give more. But that requires us to play a little differently. We generally have to try to play softer, and I'm still fighting with that. After having started playing bass with really high steel strings and really hammering them, really sort of muscling the strings, I have to be more gentle with these, and it's hard for me to remember to do that. Nonetheless, I like them a lot, and these are the strings that most people have asked me about. So let me take a second and show you the strings that are on my other bass that I use sometimes in these videos. So here's my Upton hybrid bass, and on this bass I've got a Thomastik Superflexible E and A and D string, and a Pirastro Oliv G on the G string. The Oliv G is a real gut wrapped in metal. I'm not exactly sure what kind of metal, but nonetheless it's a great string. And I like these, again, because they match this bass. I've tried many different things on this bass. I find them even, but more bowable, for example, than the Corax. Still got a nice quality of the sound. It lasts a long time, the length of the note. It's got a punch, a clarity. I think it sounds pretty even, considering that these are different kind of strings, right? I also like the bigger diameter of this Oliv. It's slightly bigger than steel strings, which again, as I mentioned, I like in general for strings. And so this bass is I'm very lucky to have two basses for sure, very, very lucky. This bass I use for things that may be more contemporary music or may require more bowing or just sort of are not that really, really traditional straight ahead jazz thing. I'm gonna use this bass. I have a Realist Lifeline pickup on it. And so this is, you know, that alternative bass. I play it outside if I need to play something in inclement weather, you know, this is the bass I'll choose. I'm very also lucky that I was able to get a Nadine microphone. This is Ear Trumpet Labs Nadine microphone, and that's how these basses are being recorded. I'm going straight into an interface into my computer. So I highly recommend these Nadine mics too, as a little parenthetical side there. But so these strings are not necessarily anything super special, these super flexibles. Lots of people don't like them, but they work on my bass. I've tried many, many sets on this bass. This is what works, so this is what I use. So let's take a minute now and talk a little bit more about string options and my experience with a variety of other particular strings. Welcome to Learn Jazz Bass with Matt Rybicki. If you're interested in talking more about jazz bass, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, check below for a reference PDF related to this discussion about strings. So, you know, this is a real rabbit hole, as we say in the United States, going down a rabbit hole, meaning that it's very complicated and takes a long time to get to where you're going, and you very well may get lost. And that's part of the deal. I certainly have struggled with strings in my time and have a lot of experience with a lot of different kinds. In fact, I went so far as to buy a digital caliper to actually measure the diameter of different strings that I was trying out to try to figure out what I liked. I spent more time in David Gage's shop than I would like to admit. They would get a little mad at me sometimes for how much time I would spend trying different setups and so on with them. I spent a lot of money there having them try soundpost things and try different strings with them and whatnot. Nonetheless, there are other resources online that you can reference, of course, and I hope that, as I mentioned earlier, I'll be able to say some things that may offer you a different perspective than others. That said, there is one resource I really, really, really want to recommend, and that is the String Matrix channel and website. This is run by a guy named Hervé Gian, I think is how you pronounce it. Correct me if I'm wrong, Hervé, or anybody that knows. And he has a matrix, a spreadsheet of him playing the same sort of pieces or same excerpts on a whole bunch of different kinds of strings. His videos are excellent. He's a fantastic, actually, player. And so everything about it is great. He gives great information, and I think it's really, really helpful. So I would really direct you there. I'll put a link in the description below. But I wanted to talk too about the experiences that I had with some strings that he hasn't talked about, and also just give you firsthand examples of what I've dealt with. As I mentioned before in my video talking about sound, the very first thing that I played with, and where a lot of people start, are Spirocores, which come from the company Thomastik Spiroccore Medium. They have a red winding on the ends, the top and the bottom ends, and they are a very loud string. It's an orchestral string. They're very stiff to me, but they are loud, and that's where I was for a long time. For many years, I was dealing with those strings. There's great things about them, and if you haven't tried them, I recommend you do to see what happens. If you want a slightly warmer, softer sound, they have Spiriocore Which, which mean light, and those have a sort of softer feel under the hands with still that Spiriocore sound. I used those for a while too, and I do recommend them. They were a little too thin for me, and the Spiriocore, regular Spirocores were also a bit too thin under my hands, and for some reason they just sort of hurt in a way that it wasn't the skin that hurt, it was like made my knuckles hurt in the way I had to press down. This is sort of alleviated with these bigger diameter strings. That's partially why I like them. And but I do recommend the Spiriocore, and as I say, I have Thomastik Superflexibles on my Upton. That's even softer, or maybe about the same sort of quote-unquote softness. And when I say softness, I mean how much does the string, give when you pull it. There are actually some spreadsheets online as well of sort of the actual tension of measured tension of one string versus another. So that would sort of give you an idea of how tight it would be under the fingers. The other steel strings that I know about are D'Addario, and I believe that Christian McBride is still playing those. I know lots of folks do play them. I don't particularly like them myself for me, but I understand why people play them. There is a tremendous mid-range clarity. They really cut through. It's very precise. You can really hear what you're doing when you're playing it. I find that's at the expense of some low end in my ears. However, the folks that choose them are monster players. So I am not taking it away from anybody. Like, do your thing. If that's what works for you, D'Addario is great. In the other realm of steel, and that also covers synthetic and gut, is the company Pirastro. And I just cannot recommend this company enough. I wish that their strings worked perfectly for both my basses. The Oliv G is a Pirastro string, but the experience I've had with them tells me how good they are. Even though they're not the perfect string for my particular basses, they are so well made. They are so consistent. They last so long. They are so exactly what they say, right? It's very authentic. Like if they say this is a string that is for orchestral work, it's really for orchestral work, you know? If this is for jazz, it's really for jazz. So let me go over some of the Pirastro strings that I've tried and give you a hint about, I think, the direction you should go. That hint would be to try their relatively new Perpetual strings. Now, I've tried the regular set, and I also tried one with a Stark D and G, which are slightly bigger diameter. These strings are absolutely incredible, and I truly wish that I could have them on my basses. They just don't work, but I can tell, as I said, that they are fantastic strings, and I've heard lots of other people play them. I think they may take the place of Spirocores at some point in the near future. They have such a clarity of fundamental. So that very center of the pitch is like crystal clear. It just sings out. They're great to bow. They feel great under the hands. The stability again of them, the consistency of them from string to string is incredible. I just can't recommend them enough. They're not super expensive comparatively to like gut strings. So I really say, like, if you're looking for something new and you're in the steel realm at all, try these Perpetual. They're absolutely fantastic. But along those lines, a very close runner-up that I tried for a while as well were the Evah Pirazzi Weichs. These are the light Evah Pirazzis. I had these on my Upton for a while, and they're absolutely fantastic. It really becomes, you know, a point of just really small preference after a certain point of trying them. Like, they're so good, I really can't say anything bad about them at all. So that's another great suggestion if you want sort of a steel string that has a little bit of sort of pliability to the feel. They're absolutely wonderful. I tried the Obligatos for a while. I didn't love them, and I expressed that to Pirastro, not in a bad way, of course, but I just, you know, they sort of, the early ones especially, they sort of roll under the fingers, which is a very weird feeling if you're not used to it. And I think the Evah Pirazzi sort of took the place of the Obligatos, in my eyes at least, as far as like what they were trying to do with the Obligatos. They eventually got to that in the Evah Pirazzi, especially the Weichs, again, my opinion. I tried some of their orchestral strings, like the Chomcor and Flexor. They're very orchestral. It's like really tricky for pits. Like, I wouldn't recommend that at all. But in the realm of guts, I spent a lot of time playing Chordas. And Chorda is from Pirastro, and they have two kinds. They have the regular Chorda and the Carlos Henriquez Chordas. The Carlos Henriquez are smaller diameter. He actually went to the company and said, hey, I would like you to make a set that is smaller in diameter across the board. I mean, I think the G might be similar in between the two, but the other strings are different diameter. So they're a little easier to sort of get down onto the fingerboard. The E and the A are slightly smaller and so have slightly more fundamental, slightly more clarity, easier to press down, and so on. They don't have the exact same kind of punch that the regular Chordas do. Those can really sort of cut through a band and can be very loud. You know, as gut strings, they can be very loud. They last a long time as far as in relation to fully gut. They put some kind of sort of covering on the unwrapped D and G. I don't know exactly what it is. I mean, I could look it up. Maybe I will as I edit this video. They put some kind of covering, like a a film, for lack of a better word, that's on top of them to sort of lengthen the life of the string, I think. And I like it in some sense, and in another I don't. But they are absolutely fantastic strings. Like they're top 3 by far of any makers of gut strings, I think. And so I would say this is a great idea to try if you want to try guts. You kind of at least will know that you're getting your money's worth with that for sure. And we'll discuss using guts for the first time in just a minute. But I do recommend those, and I tried those for a long time from them. Along that same line, Pirastro also makes the Evah Pirazzi slap, which it comes with the option to have gut D and G as well. And those are good. They're very much, that's sort of even like a little closer to steel, or a little closer to the steel experience than Carlos Henriquez. So it's like Chordas are like the biggest, and then Carlos Henriquez are like a little smaller, and then the slap are like a little smaller in diameter, a little more like steel. The E and the A, I think, are synthetic. I'm not sure if I don't think they're wrapped gut on the bottom either, but that didn't work for my basses for sure. Although again, as soon as you take them out of the package, you're like, this is a great string. Like luthiers will be like, I had both David Gage and Arnold Schnitzer were like, these are great strings. I always know these are great strings. Like even when you put them in the tailpiece, like you just can tell they're really well made. So I'm not putting those down at all. As you know, I use the Oliv on my Upton, so that's gut wrapped in some sort of metal. And there's also the Eudoxa, which are also gut wrapped in metal, and they have slightly different qualities to them. I don't remember as much about the Eudoxa. I haven't used those in a while. I think it's pretty similar though. I remember very clearly with the Eudoxa, however, when I was sort of starting to transition to guts, I had been playing Spirocores really high for a long time, and then I put some Eudoxas on the D and G, or had tried them on a different bass or something. And I was like, this is a revelation. This is incredible. These are so easy to play. Oh my gosh. And now, having played like really soft guts, I go back to Eudoxa and they feel sort of stiff, so your perception changes over time. But if you play steel and you're trying to get into guts, you might consider the Oliv or the Eudoxa, at least on the G or the D and the G, because I know that works for a lot of people. And again, they are very high quality strings. You do have to watch out and take care of your nut and your bridge cutouts, notches, because you don't want them to catch in anything, because it will start to make the windings separate. If they're caught on any little piece of wood, it will the tension of the string will make the strings over time sort of separate, and then it becomes sort of hard to play. So they do require a little bit more care. I also tried Pirastro's Jazzer strings, which were really interesting, and again, weren't for my basses. I didn't find it to be exactly what I wanted, although I did give them to a student of mine, and he absolutely loves them. He thinks they're absolutely fantastic. So, to each their own. You might want to try those. I don't think they're as expensive as the Chordas, for example, but it is a very distinct sound, and so I'm not sure that a lot of people are in love with them. I'm not putting anybody down. It's really up to your choice, and I think the individuality is what makes it great, right? We don't want to all sound the same. Now, to that end, to talk about sounding like others, I do just want to take a second and very importantly point out a couple of things. The first is, when you're trying to get a sound like somebody else, you have to research, what they use, what did they use, or what are they using. That helps a lot. And it helps a lot also to really hear them in person if you can. If this is a contemporary player, to hear them in person and to even maybe talk about them. Bass players can talk forever about strings. So if you get a chance to hear Christian McBride live, you get to hear that acoustic sound up close. It's a very different thing than somebody's recommendation, and if you have a friend that plays the kinds of strings that you like, a master playing, ask the friend, can you play their bass? Get a feel for it. So that experience of researching makes a lot of difference in making your choice, obviously. One thing I didn't realize until after some years of exploring strings was that the sound that we know from Paul Chambers and Ray Brown, Milt Hinton, and so on from the 50s and before, mid-50s and before the mid-50s, these were strings, gut strings, that are not made anymore. And that sort of threw me for a loop, because I thought, I'll find out exactly what Paul Chambers was playing and just Nobody, you know, they're not made anymore. And also the transition to steel strings happened in the mid 50s, starting in the 60s. So people started to go away from gut, and the steel strings that were made aren't made anymore either. So it's a funny thing, but worth considering as you think about, okay, I want to sound like Paul Chambers. All right, well, you can't get his strings anymore. That said, there is a small community of folks that find these old strings that aren't made anymore, like red array. They're actually red strings and they're gut. And I tried those for a while too. And there's a community of people sort of looking for them and, you know, buying them and selling them and so on. So sometimes they're on TalkBass. If you don't know the website talkbass.com, you should really check it out to continue your exploration of strings, because it's fellow bass players who sell stuff to each other. I mean, there's lots of threads of other information. There's lots of discussions, but there's a really active and great classified section where people sell strings to each other. I've done it many times. Everybody's really trustworthy, and I feel like it's a great resource for trying different things, and you can try something, not like it, and then try to sell it again without a tremendous loss to your pocketbook, right? So yeah, so check out TalkBass as well. And I also lastly just sort of wanted to wrap up talking about gut strings and some special things about them. In my history, I have tried Gotz gut and also Gamut gut, which are very, very well made, excellently made, sort of another boutique string maker. There's also Dlugolecki, very hard name to say. He's a small maker as well. These are expensive, they are handmade, they are excellent gut strings. So if you want to go that direction, check out those as well. So speaking about guts, when you are considering it, there's some things that I just want you to be aware of. That is, when you are going to try guts, because of the difference in diameter, you have to be aware of changing the size of the nut slot, the crease in the little sort of place where the string sits. That has to be wider. The places on the bridge where the strings meet, that also has to be widened. And very possibly your tailpiece hole might need to be widened, believe it or not. The strings, some, especially like the Chordas, are so thick, you can't get an E all the way up to the hole because it's so thick at the base. So you may have to have those widened as well. This is something a luthier should do. Don't try it yourself unless you have experience. So that's something to be aware of. Also, with real gut that isn't varnished like the Chordas, you have to take some time taking care of them, usually. And that involves putting oil on them, oftentimes almond oil. You can find a little bottle of almond oil, put it on your fingers, put it on the string, wipe the excess off. Essentially, you're keeping the gut hydrated, for lack of a better word. And then also over time, you'll get little hairs come up from the gut itself. Like it will start not unwrap, but like little parts will come off. You can snip them with like fingernail clippers. I've also seen people take a lighter, believe it or not, and just quickly go over the string and it will burn that little hair off. I haven't tried that. I don't want to burn my string, but I've seen people do it. I was at this jam session in Rome and the bass player was up there getting ready and he pulled out his lighter like right in front of everybody. It was like lighting his bass on fire. It was pretty funny, but he was just getting the hairs off the gut string. So it's something to be aware of, but the benefits are great. I mean, they're a hassle, yes, but the benefits are great. So if you're willing to go down that road, I am not discouraging you from trying guts at all. In fact, I would say that everyone in an ideal world should have a period of time where they are trying to play with guts. I think it teaches you a lot about how to play pits, about your bass, about sound, about swinging, and so on and so forth. So I hope that this was helpful, and please like, subscribe, check for that PDF below, just a little reference thing. And thanks for joining me today. Always remember, straight ahead and strive for tone.